Hello, this is Mr. Jarrett, and in this video tutorial, we are going to learn how to draw this object. So at the beginning of every new drawing, I would highly encourage you to look at the drawing first before you just start trying to draw it in SolidWorks. Say look at it, I mean think it through mentally of what shapes you see and what tools you might possibly have to use. So for instance, in this first drawing, we see one circle in the middle, four circles surrounding it on the outside, and we notice that the dimension over here says 4x. That does not mean we are going to multiply this number by 4. That means you will see or use this number 4 times. So there are 4 identical circles. So we might have to use the equal constraint, or you could dimension it 4 times. I also see on this that it kind of looks like if this was completed all the way around, this would be a diamond or a square on its side. So if we look closely at its dimension, you notice that there is this square symbol here in front of the dimension of one side. So this is a square. So the length of all 4 sides, if they were completed, are the exact same. So that means we can draw either this shape with the line tool, a polygon tool and make it 4 sides, or we could use the rectangle tool, but not the normal rectangle tool, because that only draws sideways. You would have to use the 3-point rectangle tool. So there's multiple different ways that you can do this. But once you have those basic shapes, how do you get this outside? So how do we have this corner cut off? How do we have this corner rounded? What tool would we use to actually do that? So thinking that through is going to help you prepare your best route to actually drawing this. So there are plenty of different ways to do this. I'm just going to do this a common way that I know most students would do, and that's just with the line tool on the outside. So follow along with me. I'm going to pull that to my other screen so I can see. And I have SolidWorks loaded already. I'm going to open a new part. So you can either hit File New or hit that piece of paper and hit Part File. You want to make sure that your units are in IPS. So down in the bottom right hand corner, change it to IPS if it isn't already. Then we'll go to the Sketch tab, select the Sketch tool, and click on the front plane. If this little window is open here, just pull it off to the side, get this thing to disappear. Sometimes that pops up. There we go. Now, I have my origin right in the middle, and we see on the picture that there is a circle surrounding that. So I'm going to go up and get the circle tool, and I'm going to make sure it's not the perimeter circle, just the normal circle tool. Start out by clicking on your origin and moving out. Draw one circle, then straight up above that, draw another, and then one out to the right, one below it, and one out to the left. Okay. Now, before I go ahead and draw the whole outside, I'm going to add some relations to these and get things in order before I start doing the outside. So get off of your circle tool. You can either hit the green check or hit escape on your keyboard. These circles right across the middle here are straight across. So the center points are straight across, meaning they are horizontal from one another. So don't click on the circle, click on the center point, hold in shift, the origin, don't forget that one. It's what everybody always forgets. And then the center of the other circle. And then we're going to select horizontal. So now they are straight across from one another. So we can click off. Then we'll click this center point of this top circle, holding in shift, click our origin and the center point of the bottom circle. And we're going to make these vertical with one another. So now if I was to try to move one up or down, notice I can't. I can only move it side to side. Okay. Now, we also said before we even started drawing that all 4 of these small circles are equal. So I'm going to hold in shift and select all 4 small circles and then set them to equal. Now, if I dimension one of them, all 4 of them will change. So let's actually dimension these a while. Get our dimension tool. This inside circle here, it shows that it has a diameter of 1.88. The outside circle, this has a diameter of 0.62. Okay. So it doesn't actually tell us a distance away from the origin here for any one of these. So for right now, they're going to have to stay blue. And we're going to have to draw that outside to then figure out where these 4 circles go. So get your line tool, and you can start out over here somewhere outside of your circle and click, zoom out a little, click up here, click over here, down, and back to it. Okay. Now, like I said, you could do this with the line tool. If I zoom out and show you a couple other options over here, you could use the polygon tool and have changed this to 4. And you could have drawn it like that. You could have used the 3-point corner rectangle and drawn like this. Okay, so there are several different options of doing this. The reason I use the line tool is because you notice how when we use these other tools, we actually get a whole bunch of relations that are already added. So every time we try to modify these corners, it's going to give us warning after warning after warning. And it's just easier to use the line tool. So I think a lot of students are going to do that anyways. So that's why I went ahead and did it. So hopefully you didn't draw these examples out here, but if you did, you can just click and hold, highlight them, and then hit delete on your keyboard. Okay, so let's get back to this. You want to make sure that on all 4 of these corners there are no relations. So for me, you notice that it added this relation here, this perpendicular, and you might say, well, it is a square, so we do kind of want that. Yes, that's true, but you're going to see here in a couple minutes that once we start adding in some other constraints and some other modifications like fillet tools on the corners, these are just going to cause issues. So if you have a small relation at these corners, just right click on them and hit delete. Okay. Now we can see that this corner and this corner are filleted. So bottom row, 3rd one in. And we want to click on this corner and that corner and set your fillet parameter to a radius of 0.62. Okay, radius of 0.62. Now, some students have asked me before, well, how do you know what that is? How do you know what the measurement is? So if I'm looking at this and you're following your leader line from this over here, this has a diameter of 0.62 and the arrow is pointing to this circle. Okay, over here, this has a radius of 0.62, so it's just a coincidence that it's the same measurement. But this is radius, that's diameter. So this arrow is actually pointing to this curved outside. So you have to kind of look close at where the arrows are. Now some students will say, well, what does this line mean? That line is indicating that this big curve out here has its center point located right here. So truthfully, the center of the fillet and the center of our circles are at the exact same spot, meaning the circle and the curve are concentric. So we're going to have to add that as well. So I'm going to slide this back over to my other screen again. So we have these fillets here. We can hit the green check. And you'll notice that each one of the fillets actually has a center point. So get off of the fillet tool. And you can simply click the arc or the fillet, whatever you want to call it. Hold in Shift, click your circle, and set this to concentric. And it will line the center points up. So let's do that on both sides. And this is that case where if we would have left that perpendicular there, we probably would have gotten a warning. So once again, click your fillet, hold in Shift, click your circle, and let's make them concentric. Okay. So it readjusted that. Now, the top and bottom here are cut off straight like this. So a lot of people would say, well, hey, let's use the chamfer tool. Well, the chamfer tool, when you're doing it sketch-wise, like in a sketch chamfer, this doesn't necessarily allow you to measure the length of this line, okay, the straight across length. It's the angle or the distance from this point to wherever you cut it off. And if we're looking at our picture shows a length measurement of that line. So I wouldn't recommend the chamfer here. I actually think the easier way of going about this is just using the line tool and clicking on this line, drawing a horizontal line over until it hits the other one, hitting escape, and then getting your trim entities button, making sure it's set to trim to closest, and just trimming these two off. So do that same thing down here at the bottom. Okay, making sure it's a horizontal line, trim entities, and trim. Okay, so that was easy. Now we can just go ahead and dimension this line. And that is 1 inch. This line down here is also 1 inch. You could have made them equal. I just had the dimension tool and I thought it was very easy to do that. It shows that from the line to the center of these circles are a 1/2 inch. A 1/2 inch. And then it shows that from one side of this to the other side is 4.38. But notice here that I'm getting a small degree symbol. That is because these are not set to parallel yet. So I'm going to hit escape to get off my dimension tool. And we need to fix up this outside because right now it can move around. It can really shift around a lot. So let's select one side here, select its opposite side. Let's set them to parallel. Okay. Let's try that again. And this one, parallel. So it might have moved some things around. Now let's make one side here and its adjacent side, meaning right next to it, let's make that perpendicular. So kind of made that side more squarish. As you can kind of see, it can still do this. So what can we do to fix that? Well, we can try to add a perpendicular here on this side to continue to get that fixed up. And we can continue to check to see if that worked. But you notice I can still once again move this around. So that's telling me right now that this line is not centered above its circle or above the origin. So watch what happens here. If I zoom in and I just move my mouse over a line, any line, okay, and you just keep it there, this little yellow dot's going to pop up. And that yellow dot is the midpoint, or a point that's not on the end, like an endpoint. It's a point that's in the middle of the line. So it's called a midpoint that we can use. So we'll select that, hold in Shift, click this center of this circle, and here, to make this from going left and right, we need it to be vertically aligned. I'm going to vertically align that. So you notice it snapped over. So let's do that same thing down here. Okay. Move my mouse over this, click that midpoint, hold in Shift, click the center point of the circle, and make it vertical. Okay. And rearrange this. So now we can see if it slides left or right, and it doesn't. Notice the only thing it does is size up and down. And we can solve that by adding in our last dimension. So we're going to get the Smart Dimension tool. Click this outside line here, the opposite outside line. Move your mouse over, and let's make that 4.38. Green check. Whole thing is fully defined. Double check to make sure it says that down here. Meaning now we can move on to the Features tab, hit Extrude, and it says it has a material thickness of 0.2. Checking our Z, it shows that it is a negative number, so that means we're going to go in reverse. So make sure the arrow here is pointing backwards. Then you can hit the green check, change our material to what it says, and this time it says it is AISI 1020, so that's in the steel folder. Notice that is not a default. So we'll have to hit Edit Material, and right there is AISI, and select it, hit Apply, and Close, evaluate its mass, and you should get a mass of 0.83 pounds with a negative Z. If you got that, you can go ahead and save it, and you can move on to the next activity. If you didn't, go back, edit your sketch, and problem solve until you have it fixed.